Good morning, friends, and we are on to discussing very important issues, particularly, I mean, all issues are important, but I think what often goes by a certain degree of neglect is the discussions around caste. And I think one of the ways in which we can actually look at the performance of governments is to actually see, or the claim of Achhe Din is to look actually at what is happening on the ground as far as caste is concerned. And I cannot see even the, 1 millimeter of difference between the past and the present, maybe even sometimes worse, because you can see lots of accounts of the most horrendous forms of punitive action that the upper caste continue to sort of exercise upon people, including little boys who are, sort of using a wall to pee, to be cut off their penises. I mean, it's like quite horrendous what I've seen in the last year. The few accounts that corporate media allows to enter into the newspapers. So we will discuss this issue, and we have a very important panel here. Nivedita first.
Thank you. So in the run-up to the general elections of 2014, there was this high decibel, multi-billion-dollar campaign of the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and I use the term dollar advisedly, not bothering to translate into rupees, because we know that a huge American PR firm was running his campaign. So throughout this entire campaign, we were made to believe by the publicists, we were made to believe by Narendra Modi himself, by pliant corporate media, and by many reasonable intellectuals, that the old Modi was gone. That the Modi regime would be growth-oriented, we were told, which, as we know, is a code. So growth-oriented, we know, is a code for corporate loot of common resources and for the continued trajectory of an inequitable, unjust capitalist order and a completely unsustainable capitalist agenda. But this appears to be the trajectory of many mainstream parties. So as Jaspal Bhatti, the late comedian, once said, the national slogan is now Sensex Ucha Rahe Hamara. So given that, that's a whole other issue, the struggle for the lives and livelihoods of ordinary people, the revaluing of nature as an independent entity, not just as a resource for human exploitation. This is a struggle that will carry on at many, many levels, regardless of which parties form government. We know that. What I will focus on here is what has happened to and with women, gender and sexuality in the 1 year that Narendra Modi ji has been in power. From the man himself to the PMO, we have received some of the usual meaningless anodyne pronouncements, the launch of Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao campaign, and of course, zero tolerance for sexual violence. Not just less tolerance or a little bit of tolerance, but a zero tolerance, shunya, which we invented, tolerance. And yet, look at the budget. Apart from announcing an amount of 1,000 crores for the Nirbhaya Trust Fund, there was not a single concrete measure that was announced. The fund was instituted, as we know, by the UPA, and it was carried forward by the BJP last year. However, in the 2 years of its creation, not one single paisa has been spent. Meanwhile, the budget for rape crisis centers was slashed just before the tabling of the union budget. Maneka Gandhi promised 660 rape crisis centers last year. The number was slashed to 36. We may note in passing that the indicators for women in the showcase state of Gujarat, where Modi had been CM for 13 years, are revealing. The sex ratio in the 2011 census is 918 women to every 1,000 men, much lower than the national average, which is 940 women to 1,000 men. School enrollment rates for girls is lower than the national average. State convictions for rape among the lowest in India. In one sense then, we may be forgiven for thinking that Modi government is no worse and no better than our previous governments who substitute for transformative policies empty rhetoric as far as women are concerned. We've known this for decades, what's new? But no. What the past year has revealed is that all those shadowy, menacing figures who we could see grouping around the Modi mask during the election campaign have stepped decisively out of the shadows. Modi himself continues to spout empty, banal rhetoric, while these shadows, acquiring greater solidity, shape, and form, have moved into direct, violent action. We must recognize that Narendra Modi leads an explicitly Hindu right regime. And this is what sets the Modi government apart from other governments. It is a Hindu right-wing government with a Hindu right-wing agenda in the social and cultural sphere. What is this agenda? There's actually one simple term that encapsulates this agenda. It is to control and police desire. It is no accident that almost every public protest against the Hindu right has been by young people creatively in different ways asserting desire, from the kiss of love to Valentine's Day celebrations. And it is no surprise that they have been arrested for peacefully kissing in public, which is not against the law in India yet, for peacefully marching up to the Vishwa Hindu Parishad office, which they were not allowed to reach, in the RSS in Jhandewala. They were not allowed to reach it by the police, by the coercive apparatus of the state, which massed to prevent young people from peacefully singing songs. Now, this is no accident that that desire is the mode of protest, and it is no accident that the centerpiece of the Hindutvavadi campaign in the social and cultural sphere is the Love Jihad campaign. Now, the Love Jihad campaign went on for a while, as we know, and then they were caught on the back foot by the humiliating backfiring of the fantastical Meerut scenario of gang rape, forcible conversion, in which it has now become very clear that the role of the BJP is very clear, the role of sundry Hindutvavadi organizations is very clear in breaking up a simple, consensual Hindu-Muslim relationship. Simple does not really match consensual Hindu-Muslim relationship in our era, but for me it's simple. A simple consensual Hindu-Muslim relationship between working class young kids, not by elite students of RSS pet hate JNU. They were just ordinary people living in UP. Now that has been thoroughly exposed. Once it has been exposed, the Hindu right arrived at a new formula, which involves two assertions. One, that there must be some fire generating all the smoke, because it's not only us, it's not only the Hindu right which is worried. The church in Kerala and the Akal Takht have also expressed their anxieties about this campaign. And the second point that they make is that so real is this danger that the claims have been investigated by the police as directed to do so by the courts. These kinds of arguments are not just made by explicit Hindutvavadis in their shots. These are made by self-described liberal intellectuals. Now let me just take up these 2 points one by one. So the Akal Takht and the church are also worried, so it must be true. Of course, patriarchal elements across the religious spectrum are in a deep crisis, because young men and women are falling in love across caste and religious divides, and this is rocking the foundations of caste and religious identity. Muslim parents are as worried and anxious about this as are Christian and Hindu parents. They don't want their daughters marrying non-Muslims any more than the latter want Muslim in-laws. An investigative report in the Indian Express listed elopements that provided the Hindu right opportunities to mobilize communal violence in Uttar Pradesh, and this included Muslim parents forcibly taking their daughters away from Dalit husbands. In these instances, the BJP descended to demand the return of the girls to their husbands. Because of course, the woman has no caste or religious identity other than that of her husband. So if we get their girls, our numbers increase. As Modi intones Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, behind him the Hindutva goons chant Beti Bachao Bahula. This is an actual campaign. It's not a figment of my fevered queer feminist imagination. Every figment of feminist queer imaginations is true, unfortunately. If the Christian right and the Akal Takht express these fears too, they are only latching on to a convenient bogey produced by their mirror images, the Hindutvavadis. Across the board, patriarchal elements are united in controlling the sexuality of their young and taming illegitimate desire that could challenge the institution of patriarchal heterosexual families, which is at the root. This institution of the heterosexual patriarchal families is at the root of our unjust and inequitable society. Take the second point that they make. It has been investigated by the police, so it must be true. the fact that in Kerala and Karnataka, inquiries were conducted to ascertain the existence of love jihad is cited as proof that the menace is real, but the inquiries in fact showed that there is no evidence whatsoever to the campaign, none whatever. But the fact that the police investigated is cited as proof. You arrest 10 Muslim men, that is proof that they are terrorists. The arrest is proof that they are terrorists. So the investigation is proof that it happens. You're not interested in looking at what happened after the investigations. And the media, the role of the media, let us now no longer be in any doubt. The media is completely bought out. It is completely sold out. It is completely planned. I know that there are very many brave individuals who manage somehow to function, but as an empire, as a set of institutions, it is completely planned. And I think it's important here to bring to your attention the extent to which the media participates in this misinformation. And it is clear from a news report on IBM 7 titled Love Jihad in India Exposed. Now, from the content, it appears to have been made in October 2009, at the time that the police presented its report to the Kerala High Court saying there's no evidence of love jihad. But the video was uploaded on July 22nd, 2013. I accessed it. Now, the entire video of about 30 minutes, there is not one shred of evidence that is presented. All you have is an extremely high-pitched commentary, which I will not bother to reproduce, but you know how it goes, by IBN reporters, that claims the existence of a widespread ring of Islamic love jihad, jiska baqaida manual bhi hai. This manual is not shown to us. In fact, no evidence at all is shown to us. Indeed, after a series of claims and assertions, the commentary actually confesses that off-camera पुलिस हमें बताती है कि बहुत सारे संगठन इसमें जुड़े हुए हैं, लेकिन सबूत न होने के चलते we cannot reveal those names. मतलब हम समझते हैं, हम जानते हैं कि ये सब सबूत नहीं है, हमारे दिल की बात हम आपको बता रहे हैं. Worse than not offering proof, we find that there is outright misrepresentation of what people say, and I don't know what the appropriate forum is to take unethical practices by visual media. But IBN 7 has to be taken to whatever is the forum. Because at one point, so there's no evidence, but at one point claiming to show us a love jihad ke haathon barbad ladki, there is a glimpse of a pixelated face and a girl's voice says something which only a few of us will understand because she's speaking in Malayalam. Now when she's speaking in Malayalam, this is what she's saying, and I know Malayalam, I'm a Malayali. So she's saying, through the use of mobile phones, then in schools, through friends, in ice cream parlors, theaters, in these sorts of places. It's only a fragment. She says this. You cannot make out the context of what she's saying. Off camera, a man's voice asks something I couldn't catch, and she replies, there is attraction. On the screen appear in Hindi as she is speaking these words. मेरी उससे मुलाकात एक बस स्टॉप पर हुई थी. वो रोज़ मेरे पीछे आता था. किसी तरह मेरा नंबर उसके हाथ लग गया. वो रोज़ फ़ोन करने लगा. मुझे लगा कि वो मुझे प्यार करता है, पर ये मेरी गलतफहमी थी. The viewer is led to believe that the Hindi words are a translation of what the woman says in Malayalam, even though her voice stops after that fragment that I just translated for you. Now, I don't have the time now to go into the shocking, and this is not just one. There's a lot of use of Malayalam in this, and Malayalam clips, which are obviously from completely different contexts. The people are saying something, the Hindi voiceover is saying something else. I don't have the time now to go into the shocking dishonesty and unethical manipulation carried out by IBN 7 in this supposed news report, but I've written about this on Kafila in the new and improved Love Jihad formula, through which you'll find a link to the actual thing itself. What is clear with the trajectory of Hindutvawadis now is that the target is not only minorities and non-Hindus, it is everyone who loves illegitimately. Every single person whose desire flows outside the tracks, as it were. So it is no accident that desire is the node of both attacks by the Hindu right as well as by spirited protests against Hindu right policing. Unfettered desire is the death knell to the patriarchal heterosexual family, to the politics of numbers played by the Hindu right, where every conversion and every interreligious marriage takes away from Hindu numbers. This is the logic of majoritarian politics, which holds that birth-based identities are the basis of the majority that should determine politics. But democratic politics is not about birth-based identities. Democratic majorities are determined by political goals. My community is secular, feminist, fully Ambedkarite. It is queer. It is not Hindu. And there are multiple such communities. There is in fact no Hindu community that will vote for the BJP despite the overwhelming majority that Hindus currently are in this country. If every Hindu voted for the BJP, we would never have to have elections again. It has never happened. It didn't happen in this election. It will never happen. So why is the Hindu right afraid of women and men who define Hinduism in their own way? Why are they afraid of centuries of Hindu tradition? I mean, the banning of Wendy Doniger's book, or the attack actually, not the banning, the attack on Wendy Doniger's book has to do with fearing the explicit celebration of centuries-old Hindu traditions, in which Sita is the heroine, not Ram, in which there are goddesses who are dark and fertile, they are dangerous, they are fierce, they are free, in which sex is not some pallid thing that is dictated by hypocritical priests, but it's a multi-species, multi-gender, splendid thing in what used to be called Technicolor. Why are they so afraid of people whom they love, regardless of their gender, their caste, their religion? Why are they so afraid of independent women who choose to live their lives on their own terms? Why are they so scared of young people who post on Facebook that they pick them up and arrest them? Well, they should be afraid. For it is we who stand in the way of their homogenizing and disenfranchising nationalist project. We who will not love by the rules. We who say, like my very devout Hindu mother, why do these people say we will build the temple only there? Is Ram a mere mortal that he was born in one place like ordinary humans? They should be afraid of us. We who will not be defined by our legitimate fathers, who are Najayas, we are Najayas and proud of it, because in the worlds we create, birth and fatherhood will not be the determinants of identity.
So, Satish, your turn.
We all know that anniversaries are somewhat arbitrary. So what can we say about caste and the Modi regime on both these levels? If we look at the immediately visible level of incidents and happenings, I agree with Nivedita that with regard to caste as well, there is really not much that separates this regime from previous regimes. The same kinds of caste atrocities have continued, the same kinds of government inaction and action have happened. So in that sense, with regard to caste, this regime is not spectacularly more casteist than any previous regime. But there are some significant differences nevertheless, despite the fact that we have a continuity in terms of incidents of violence across the country. We have state negligence, the most flagrant example of which is that this government has allowed the ordinances associated with the Prevention of Atrocities Act to lapse. The act itself remains on the laws, on the statute books, but the necessary ordinances to give shape to its concrete details, those have been allowed to lapse. But what is significant in an overall sense is the broad attempt of this government to fold caste politics into communal politics. That is to say, to make caste politics articulate with and in a sense subordinated to communal politics in different ways. And we see this in two main ways. One is the very, very crude and in-your-face manner in which, on the one hand, reservation has been linked to Ghar Wapsi. So those who reconvert to Hinduism, who were misguided and went into different religions and wish to come back to their original home, will get the added incentive of reservations. At the same time, although this is a Maharashtra government decision, I'm sure it is, the central government was fully in sympathy with it. In Maharashtra, we have the striking down of existing reservation for Muslims under the OBC category, using the pretext of a Supreme Court decision, which in fact had also cast doubt on reservation being given to Marathas. Now, reservation for Marathas has been kept, as they say, barkarar, while reservation for Muslims has been cancelled, which was in any case 5%. At the same time, we have what is really new here, the concerted targeting of Christians. The degree to which now every minor functionary or hanger-on of this political formation feels empowered to do things of this sort in terms of targeting Christians is a new thing. So in terms of on the surface events, happenings and so on, there is a lot of continuity, with the one major difference that there is a concerted attempt to fold caste politics into communal politics, to make this all in some sense a subset of the larger Hindutva agenda. But in my opinion, the much more important thing that this regime stands for and is attempting, as yet it is only an attempt, we have yet to see whether this will succeed, is a much less visible but much more consequential thing, and that is a broad-based attempt to reinvent upper caste hegemony. What do I mean by this? Let us start with the euphoria that some quarters experienced and expressed at the 2014 election results. One of the most prominent sentiments that was expressed was that this represents the end of caste politics, or the politics of caste. Now we know that what was actually meant by this and why so many people were enthused by it was that it meant for them the end of the wrong kind of caste politics. That is to say, the end of lower caste politics, or politics driven by the so-called lower castes. So what the Modi regime seemed to have perfected was a method of which seemed impossible before. From the 1990s in particular, it seemed impossible that there could be any government in this country at the national level that would not explicitly take account of the numerical compulsions of caste. And here was a government that claimed that it won on the development agenda, that claimed that it did not play caste politics, and it seemed like that on the surface. But what has really happened, and as various sources within the government itself, the Amit Shahs of this world and so on, themselves admit in different contexts, is that this was certainly not the end of caste politics. Caste was extremely important in this campaign as well. The kind of finesse that is now required. What we have seen is the end of a macro, undifferentiated caste politics that was on from the 1990s onwards, and which has perhaps reached its limit today. Every large caste group in the country is today differentiated by class, by region, by many other factors. And these differentiations are now beginning to find expression in politics. So caste politics has become even more complex than it used to be before. And playing the game of caste politics at the national level today involves both dimensions. The dimension of disaggregation, you must interpolate, you must call upon or even sometimes create disaggregated caste groups, splinter groups within larger groupings, and at the same time you have to work on the second dimension. That is to say, you must orchestrate, you must aggregate these micropolitics in your favor at the national level. So it's not that caste has gone away. It has gone away in some familiar ways, but it is very much present and very much dictating things to the extent that it does in the Indian context. It's not the only factor, obviously. So this is what this regime has, in effect, tried out. And in terms of the larger sweep of caste politics in post-independence India, this is Mark II upper caste hegemony. Mark I upper caste hegemony was, broadly speaking, the Nehruvian era. This era was the era of nation building. It was the era of perhaps national naivety, great faith in our leaders and so on. And it was possible for the close alignment of upper caste interests and the nationalist task of nation building, for this to go unnoticed, so that the upper castes were able to, as they say, flourish in the Nehruvian regime with a clear conscience, that they were not pursuing their interests, but they were actually pursuing the interests of the nation. It just so happened that they were in the right place at the right time, just when jobs were expanding, higher education was expanding, and so on. So the Nehruvian regime was a continuation of the 1930s nationalist movement. A nationalist movement that cannot be repeated in that form today. Almost every single leader of the nationalist movement was upper caste. It's even hard to look for OBCs, leave alone Dalits, apart from the one or two tokens. The rest of the country accepted to some degree that these were our leaders. These leaders enjoyed some credibility. And from the Pune Pact of 1932, when Gandhi settled the caste question in a particular way, by marginalizing the possibility of active Dalit politics and folding them into the Congress umbrella. From then until the 1970s and the emergence of the category of the atrocity as a political category, which is interestingly happens around the same time that accidental stove deaths get recognized as dowry murders. At the same time, roughly the same time, these scattered incidents of violence against lower castes and particularly Dalits across the country get to be recognized politically as the atrocity. So by the 1970s, this regime breaks down, and 1990 is another major turning point when the caste Mandal revolution brings the caste question unquestionably into center stage. What ought to have been obvious to us long ago is made completely unignorable by the Mandal revolution. So between 1990 and 2014, we see the unfolding of this logic where caste is dominating politics in a very explicit way. And the claims to hegemony have broken down. The upper castes are still dominant, but they are dominant not through consensus, not through acceptance. What seems to be now being tried out by the new regime, and we don't know if they will succeed, is to project a new improved form of, like new improved love jihad, this new improved form of upper caste hegemony. And what is different about this form of caste hegemony? You cannot any longer have only upper caste faces in the leadership. And so we have the rediscovery or the refashioning, the reinvention of Modi as an OBC leader. How many of us thought of Modi as an OBC leader before the 2014 elections? When, for example, the time when Mr. Modi garnered the most attention, 2002, that dramatic year, how many of us thought of him as a Gandhi? Hardly anybody. And yet, in 2014, we have the Chaiwala OBC PM, the candidate SP. So we have a new form of upper caste hegemony. A person like Mr. Modi, who is representing upper caste interests, but at the same time putting himself forward as an OBC face, as an OBC person. And in this way, trying to refashion a new kind of hegemony, which cannot be as complacent as the older Nehruvian kind of hegemony, but will have to take account of the hard realities of the demography of caste in our country. There are three main challenges that this attempt faces. The first challenge that it faces is, if this regime is also marked by its great enthusiasm for corporate interests, then how will corporate interests and an attempt to fashion this new hegemony, how far will they be compatible? That is one challenge. The second, more interesting challenge is from within. What will make this work is something approximating a radical form of Hindutva. Interestingly, the kind of model that Savarkar proposed. A model of Hindutva which advocates beef eating, which is radically against caste, and does not really care for the upper caste as such, as long as everything can be subsumed under the rubric of Hindutva, and as long as Hindutva in turn can be nationalist. So today the Modi regime cannot be nationalist in the same way. Can it follow the Savarkar model of Hindutva? It looks unlikely, because already beef eating and beef itself and the Gau Vansh has become once more emblematic and is being brought into the center stage of our politics. So, will this work is the question. Finally, and perhaps the most critical challenge, how much real space will the upper castes in this formation give to the lower castes? This is a question of great concern. Recent events, actually since 2002, we have been worried about this tendency and the degree of success that this tendency has gained for Hindutva forces to be recruiting lower caste elements, including tribals, including Dalits, OBCs. This is, after all, now we are no longer as naive and innocent as we were in the Nehruvian era. And when I say we, I mean people from all castes. So it will not be possible to simply, hoodwink groups into coming. Some real space will have to be given to them. And I think a decisive question for our country in the coming years, and in terms of this particular regime, is how much real space will actually be given within a Hindutva agenda to the lower castes. To the degree that they succeed in this, the challenges that we face grow. So these are the three challenges, but there is broadly continuity at the level of events, and so at least so far. However, a new form of more contemporary, more savvy kind of upper caste hegemony is attempted to be reinvented by this regime, and that, in my opinion, is the main challenge that we will have to face. Thank you.
No, I'm afraid I was not a very good time manager, so I shall make my own comments very brief so that we have a decent amount of, you were quite, but we were given 15 minutes each for you, and it's impossible to do a critique of the kind of forces that we are faced with in 15 minutes. It's actually quite tough, especially teachers who have a 50-minute compulsion
also
to
repeating because
DNA.
Yeah, it's in our DNA. That's right. So I won't really say very much, except that I would like to bring the two speakers and what they have said together. And because the session is titled Caste and Gender, Gender and Caste, I actually can't think about them separately. I always think of them together, because for me the heart of the whole enterprise of Hindutva culture, which has a long history of a Hindu culture behind it, is really to bring caste and gender continuously together. I just want to, I think Nivedita pointed out very well the particular challenges that this one year has presented, but I think we are actually confronted with a longer situation, which in a sense Satish has also outlined. There is what is the structural change that is going to happen, which is going to bring you Achhe Din? I'm not very sure, because Achhe Din is a rhetoric, and for a lot of people, unless there are fairly serious transformations that happen to the structure, no Achhe Din is likely to come. But we are so we have just gone away completely from the idea of serious change, that if you can hold on to whatever existed in the past, we seem to be sort of okay with it, and it seems there's a problem. Now, at the heart of this entire enterprise of caste and gender is that marriage and family are absolutely central to the society, and it's a deeply political sphere. We don't think of it as political, but it is, and it's not before Love Jihad. It's a deeply political sphere. It's a sphere, and I want you to remember that, go back to the Meenakshipuram conversion and to the actual impulse that created the VHP. The VHP was created or got its real energy after the Meenakshipuram conversions. And what was the Meenakshipuram conversion? It was not a bunch of random Dalits who sought to become Muslim. It was a intercaste marriage. It was a marriage between a Kallar girl and a Dalit boy that resulted in them being hounded so much that they had to escape and run and remain on the run for so long, couldn't come back, and then the 300 families in that, or the X number of families that Dalit families that lived in Meenakshipuram simply decided that the only way they could stand together and hold on to the kind of pressure that they were being subjected to was to convert to Christianity, to Islam. We must remember that, because at the heart of the Hindutva enterprise is the sustaining of the marriage and family system, and anything that challenges that will also upset the entire structure of caste and the reproduction of caste in terms of the endogamous reproduction of caste, including its control over resources and labor and the arrogation of labor. So I think it's extremely important for us to recall that these are not random things that are happening. Babulal Bajrangi, his pamphlets are interesting. As early as in 2002s or 2004s, when he was still out, he had a pamphlet out which said in every Hindu household there is an atom bomb, and that atom bomb is the daughter, because the daughter can simply decide to make a marriage of her own choice. So they know what is the consequence of the woman's the way she's going to stake her claim to choice, and that can actually upset this entire structure. So going back from Manu's, the Bhagavad Gita's dystopia, which is Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga is, what is Kali Yuga? It's basically the lower caste won't perform their duties, women will not perform their duties. That is dystopia in the Hindu mind, and that is actually the heart of the enterprise. So to turn the regular intercaste fears, marriage of the intercaste fears, which are marriages from Haryana to in Western, in the Vishal Haryana area to Western UP and Love Jihad is not actually different, because it evokes for every household the fear of the daughter making a choice, evokes immediately the range of choices that she can make, and it's not only the Muslim that she's going to marry, it is the choice that she will assert to marry across the caste divide. So it seems to me it's extremely political for us to understand and stop this business of saying marriage and family is in the private sphere and something is happening in the political sphere. They're all in one line, and we must stop this business, because we can't think gender and we can't think caste without us breaking this artificial divide. And I'm very glad that this session is discussing it, and now we'll end the session. Thank you very much.